Hi, my name is Erica. I'm the Executive Director at AIFF, and I am joined here by many of our local filmmakers in AIFF 21. These are locals only shorts filmmakers joining us today to talk about their films. I have a couple general questions for the whole group, so I'm just going to ask them one at a time and we'll go through and have everybody answer. So my first question, I just want to hear about your project. If you could introduce yourself, what your project is, the role you played on it. People will have seen it by now. We're at the end of the film. And then talk a little bit about your inspiration and what inspired you to start the project, how you got started with it. So,
my name is Deb Harder, and I started this project I think it was the end of October of 2019. And it was something I wanted to do because I'm actually a photographer. So I've never dabbled in film or anything. I've done videos that display my photography for presentations and stuff like that, but really wanted to do something that was a little bit more challenging. And I thought, well, I'll start out with a short story. And I'm a little bit drawn to the macabre and kind of scary, creepy kind of things. And so my inspiration for the story was, the Night Gallery episodes from, you probably don't remember because I'm a lot older than you, and from the late 60s, Rod Serling's. And so I thought, well, I'll just do a 20-minute, write a 20-minute short story. And basically I had to learn everything. I was the camera person, I was the director, I was the writer, I was the stylist, I was pretty much, I was the drone flyer. I had to learn how to use the stabilizer, gimbal. So, and it was very much a challenge. And plus I had friends of mine that were willing participants to join in at the project.
Great, thank you for sharing.
Hi, I'm Deanna Morse. I'm an experimental animator, and I make an animation film every year. But one of the things I do too is I participate in an international project. I've done this for a couple of decades. It's through ASIFA, the world's oldest and largest international animation association. And in this project, artist teachers work with children around a common theme. And then the films are stitched together and shown at an international festival, usually Hiroshima in Japan. And the theme for last year was recipes from your home country. And I was sort of noodling around about, potato salad and deviled eggs and, some of our distinctively American recipes, and wasn't very inspired. And then I took a workshop with Corbin Brashear, who you're going to meet below, a felting artist at the Grants Pass Museum of Art, where I made this little cute chickadee. And I realized that Corbin and I shared a love of birds and working with children. And so I kind of twisted the notion to make it recipes from your home country, recipes for birds in your backyard in Oregon. So that's how the project came out. And it didn't get screened at Hiroshima because that festival unfortunately couldn't do the pivot and continue during pandemic, but it was screened in the UK so far and here. So I'll pass it on to Bruce.
Yes, thanks. Ever Far Forward is just a small part of a larger project for me called Cascadia. And it's going to be a series of these small vignettes that I string together in some sort of abstract narrative, and Ever Far Forward is just one part of that. I'm going for a very untraditional storytelling mode. It's very abstract, and it's a lot like my visual art, which I've been doing on the computer since 2000. I started as a mixed media painter, moved into doing digital art in Photoshop, and then from there sprung into doing time-based work. And so this is, I did everything. I did the sound, filming, collage, all that. It's a one-man project.
Hi, I'm Walter Haussner, and my film is Dulce et Decorum Est, which is a poem by Wilfred Owen, who was a British Army officer during World War I. And the genesis of this project was actually I was making another film with Stephen Oliver, who does the reading for Dulce. And we're just hanging out, we were discussing some script matters. This was summer of 2019. And I know there are a couple of other people here inspired by Rod Serling. And this first film we were doing together was another thing inspired by Rod Serling. And anyway, I showed him some BBC Memorial Veterans Day. They call it Armistice Day in Great Britain. Readings of various poems by World War I veterans. And like, I don't know if you're familiar with them, Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen are probably the two most prominent ones. And he was very keen on doing a reading, and I was keen on doing it with him. So, but we wanted to make it a bit more than a reading. So we wanted to do it in the mode of a flashback. So we figured at Steve's age, if he were a World War I veteran, it would have been during about probably the mid 1960s during the Vietnam era. So that's where that Vietnam aspect comes in. So it's basically a poem told in the mode of a flashback. And hopefully it works that way for everybody. So thank you.
Hey, I want to say I watched all of your guys' films and I was blown away. You guys are so talented. So thank you for that. I want to give you a round of applause for that. You kind of forget living in Ashland, Medford, Central Point, you kind of forget there's all this film happening in theater, and just to watch your guys' work, it was just amazing. So anyway, I'm Greg Franklin, and my film is Augury. There it is right there. And I too was inspired by Rod Serling and Alfred Hitchcock. I grew up watching Night Gallery and Twilight Zone and Hitchcock films. And I wanted to tell a story that had a twist ending. So I loved reading O. Henry stories when I was a teenager. And I thought it'd be great to make like 6 little short independent films that had a twist ending and then turn it into a feature film with somebody who kind of like introduces each of the story lines. So I thought that was kind of what I was setting my mind to do. So I've filmed 2 of them so far. I still have to film 4 more. And this film Augury is about a man who wakes up, and it's all happens within the month of September, but he's written himself 3 letters. And each time he wakes up, like a week passes, but each letter forewarns of a possible, tragedy or death that might happen to him. So he's trying to figure out, how am I going to avoid this? And so I won't give it away if you haven't seen the film, but he's just trying to figure out how can he cheat death and avoid this fate that he's, caught up in. So anyway, I just, that's what I do. And I've been doing film off and on for like 30 years. And I'm fortunate to work with a crew of people in the Valley that do lots of different things like editing and producing and writing and all that. So anyway, that's what I do. So thank you.
Like Deanna said, I worked on the film with her, and I'm a felt artist and have never made a film before. My sister's a filmmaker, but I had been teaching this class, and Deanna and I were chatting after my workshop, and she said she did animation, and I had been really wanting to explore collaborating with someone on just how to do animation with felt, because it works, you can have armatures, and I just was really excited. And so we put our heads together, and she said she had this project, and we recruited some local kids and just had a blast making the film, lots of laughs and giggles. And I worked ahead of time. We worked on the birds as part of it. The kids made little felted birds that have armatures inside and can move. And then we spent some time filming, and just, I fell in love with the whole process. And so it was just a fabulous experience. And I'm just very happy to be part of this whole experience now.
So my name is Nisha Burton, and I made the film A Hurricane with Fire. It's a documentary about the fires that happened here in Southern Oregon and went through the towns of Talent and Phoenix. I started filming pretty much the day after the fire. I didn't necessarily know that I would be making this full documentary, but as a longtime Southern Oregon resident, as well as a filmmaker and a documentary filmmaker, I just felt called in that moment to start documenting. And then through that, I continued on capturing the days and weeks and months afterwards. And it seemed like an appropriate goal to get the film done, completed by the time for the film festival this year. So I really pushed to make that happen. And it feels a bit like my giving back to the community in the way that I can as a filmmaker, because I wanted to share these stories. And a lot of the stories are my friends, are my community members. They're very close to home. So it was both a very poignant piece to work on, as well as what I felt like a very necessary piece, both to be in this film festival and then also to get out into other film festivals and a bigger community, so that our community's story isn't lost in the news cycle, but really the breadth and gravity of what happened to our towns. It can be seen for more than it's just a 15-minute thing. This is a year-long process that we're still in, and we're going to be in for quite a while. So that's why I made that piece, and it was really powerful to work on.
Hi, my name is Martin Hilligoss, and I'm the writer, director, and editor of Isolated. And I grew up in Ashland, Oregon, so I'm really excited to be a part of the festival and be here with all of you and all of your other great films. And this was, a film that was obviously inspired by the pandemic and a man and his dog escaping to the lake. And I just wanted to sort of deal with what COVID and the pandemic and isolation was doing for people who already were struggling with isolation and mental health issues and feeling isolated and depressed. And so I wanted to kind of tell that perspective of how it was being reinforced by the pandemic, and work within my means with what I have with my dog and my father. And I shot the film with my good friend Taylor Humphrey, who's a local filmmaker as well. And really, really happy to have it come to fruition and be able to show it at the festival. So thank you.
So my name is Moriah Doepkin, and I wrote, directed, edited Father Figure. And this started off, I just was inspired by the idea of two priests in a confessional and what that conversation could look like. And I just kind of went from there. And this project was my capstone film, or my senior film for SAU's digital cinema major. And so I spent the whole year kind of fine tuning it. And I was very lucky that the last day of shooting was actually the last week that churches were open before the lockdown happened. So I managed to get all my filming in right before that happened. I got a lot of help from different students and people in the community, and
Hi, my name is Jamie, and I recently moved to Ashland last summer. I was actually born there, and then moved away when I was a kid and decided to move back because it's one of my happier childhood memories. But I'm the director and producer of the music video called Freedom. And the background of that is this comes from a documentary called This Is Love. We premiered it in 2018 at Rain Dance Film Festival in London. It won the Film of the Festival award, and it's since screened, and I lost track, but we've won over 15 awards so far. But it's still making the film festival circuit. But when I filmed it, the initial part in 2017, before the pandemic, with the idea in mind of, actually, I don't remember what my original idea was behind it, but then some things came up, and then when the pandemic happened, and then after we screened the film, I took the end credit song, and then I just kind of turned it into what I turned it into, which was all the collaborated videos of the Black Lives Matter movement, and then just everything else between, women's rights and everything that's been going on overseas. So that was just kind of my project, how I wanted to display everything of kind of making it political, of course. So, but also how it fits in with the documentary as well. which is about African-American musician Rudy Love, who we tell the story of his music and how it's been kind of hidden through credit swapping and forgeries. It's a really interesting film, but yeah, I did the music video for it. So.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. I do have another question, kind of a two-part question. We have such a diverse body of films here. There's so many different kinds of content and different formats here, which is really cool to see. I'm curious to know how this past year, how being in COVID and being isolated, not having your same resources you normally have access to, how that has affected your creative process, either how you work in isolation or maybe have collaborated with your team in a different way. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And then kind of, like I said, two-part, if you're working on anything now that you'd like to share with our audiences and in this, as we move into this new chapter, this new phase. Deb, would you like to kick us off again?
Sure. COVID, it's been interesting because it did give me an opportunity to maybe think of some different stories, because after, this first project, the SLAUGH, was just something that I was kind of just doing for fun, and at times didn't take as seriously but now that I have time, I can really sit down and since I have been isolated, and do a little bit better job with the writing, which is always challenging. And I have been actually in the process of working on another short horror film again. This one might be a little bit longer, hope not, but I'm using, I think what I learned from the first one, I'm actually taking my time a little bit more, because like when we did the SLAUGH, it was like everything was rushed because we were doing it within the season, and I had to make everything look like it was fall, and there was a lot taken outside, and also we rented Hanley Farms for one day, and so I had to do it all in one day and do that shoot. So this time I decided I'm going to spread it out a little bit more and learn from the mistakes I made in the first film, and really try to button it up in this next film. So COVID is kind of, even though I'm isolated, I've been able to hammer out the details and work on stuff like that. So that's about it.
Yeah, I've actually had a really productive year. As an animator, you work pretty much on your own anyway, in isolation, one person doing things. And one thing I did was, at the beginning of COVID, I pulled out some old cells that I had drawn that had to do with housework. And I thought it was kind of appropriate. I never could finish that film because I never could quite get an angle on it, but it's sort of appropriate for what we were dealing with in pandemic, a lot of cleaning and sweeping. And then I also did a couple projects that we pulled out from way back. One's about mechanical dolls, and right now we're having someone do the soundtrack for us, and we did it over Zoom between friends in Michigan that I had collaborated with. And the Zoom thing's been interesting too. My group of Michigan animators has started doing what we call Annie-Zoomation, where we take this set of squares that we work in, and then animate things like passing something, and then the person over here would pick it up. And we've been doing just some fun projects, just playing with the Zoom space, trying to make it a little more festive than it usually is. So yeah, I'll be glad to get out of pandemic, but it's been an oddly productive year.
Yeah, I can relate to Deanna working alone on the project. It's pretty much how it is for me, even doing, especially doing two-dimensional work. And when the pandemic hit, I was right in the middle of finishing up work for an exhibit that was eventually canceled. And so I had to shift gears mentally and emotionally to just regroup and figure out what I was doing. The piece that I did for the film festival, though, was mostly complete. And Interesting, didn't really have anything to do with the fire. It's just that I decided to use this piece from the larger body of work because the theme was, rising from the ash. And so I thought it was an appropriate piece for the festival. I've just finished moving from Ashland to Talent. The house that I bought survived the fires, surprisingly enough. We made an offer for it back in July, and just now I'm sitting in boxes, and I'm looking forward to getting everything situated so I can start in again working on the rest of the Cascadia vignettes. So that's what I'll be working on next. And that's it for me. So Walter, what do you say?
Hey, Bruce, thanks. Yeah, a few months into the pandemic, I was getting pretty antsy from a creative stance. I mean, I have a day job, I work full time, and I work with first responders. So, I had to take some steps to be isolated. I mean, more isolated even at work due to that work environment. But come about the end of last summer, I was really antsy, and I got a hold of Steve, who is the actor in Dulce. So we did that, and we did another one, The Partisan, finished that up in November. But as for the future, I've always had a keen interest in noir. So I've really been reading a lot of early 20th century noir short stories, and just to come up with some ideas. So I think the next thing may certainly be noirish. Let's put it that way. I'd like to have a twist to it, maybe a more modern day noir, but I'm hoping hopefully by the end of summer to start on that, but we'll see. Okay. Thank you.
So when I started working on my films, I wrote 4 scripts originally, like about 2 years ago. And the next one I was going to film was at the Varsity in Ashland. And I kept on trying to get in there to film. And then the pandemic hit. And then I couldn't ever get my crew and my actors and everything to work out with a good date because it was always shifting. So I thought, oh, well, I'll just start writing some more scripts. Luckily, I was able to I did some acting for CTP. And some of the actors that were there with me that are in the film AUGURY, they like, hey, let's do a film. I'm like, okay. So I wrote another script that was kind of curtailed to that group that I was doing theater with at the time. And then 2 of the actors were SAG actors. And I don't know if you've ever worked with SAG actors, but you have to go and get a contract, and you have to make sure that they get paid, and there's certain things you have to have happening. So we all had to get COVID testing and wear a mask, of course, which we would do normally. But it was just a whole different world for me. And I really have great respect for those big film companies that have to do this on a huge scale, because I know for all of us, we're trying to do it with the resources we have. And I felt exhausted at the end of 2 days of shooting. I'm like, oh my gosh, how could I continue to do this, without a lot of support? But for me, it's been an interesting road. I've actually written more now, which is nice because I've had that time. I'm also a teacher, so teaching and writing and filming and doing some theater stuff when I can. It's all just a big, fun adventure.
So I've had an interesting year of pivoting, and I'm a felt artist, and I usually work in the schools, and had just started a job working as an outdoor educator with a farm to school program. And so I found myself creating online content for the schools as a bumblebee named Nader. So we had Polly and Nader, and we were a bee and a butterfly, and we did a bunch of online different videos, a whole series that I think we had 13 episodes, and then I ended up doing, most recently, I'm going to be part of the Art Beyond sculpture installation that's going to be happening starting in May. My pieces are going to be in Science Works. And I'm working on big, giant, I'm excited to work on a larger scale, because normally I'm working small and I go to regional art fairs and everything has to fit in my van. And now I'm going big and working on some pieces that are going to be hanging from a big cottonwood tree there at Science Works. So I'm excited to go in different directions and working on a children's book that's going to be illustrated with needle felted illustrations, and looking forward to getting back into workshops and teaching. I teach needle felting locally and at art retreats all over the Northwest, and I'm eager to kind of get back to interacting with live people again. So, and Nisha, you're next.
Thank you. Yeah, as far as the process goes of the filmmaking in these times, when I do documentaries, oftentimes I am wearing all of the various hats. So it wasn't too different from previous times, except for when interviewing people, masking up and having social distance. But it was an interesting element to have that piece with interviewing, because it is so personal, and disarming people is such a big part of being able to get a good interview. So with the mask on, it was just an adjustment. But other than that, it was very similar to my process in the post and everything, post-production. And as far as next projects coming up, a big part of what I'm doing is both submitting this film that I made to other film festivals and hopefully getting it out there more. And then I also have 2 just for fun projects that I filmed before. One is a dance video, because I'm also a dancer, and another one is a narrative starring myself and all filmed by myself, true to the quarantine times. And so I'm editing that. And then I also have a company that specializes in immersive technologies. And so I'm working on 2 projects that are using immersive technologies, virtual reality, to tell stories. And those are really fun projects to be working on as well, pushing the new edge, the new boundaries of where storytelling can go when the user is fully immersed in experience and has a level of agency that they don't have in traditional filmmaking. So those are the projects that I'm working on right now, and feel thankful for these times to have so much opportunity to be able to create.
Yeah, so when COVID hit, I was finishing my final year in my master's program. So it changed things pretty dramatically for a lot of production possibilities. And I had a lot of big opportunities that unfortunately were canceled. But I pretty much, I very quickly just had to shift gears, and it really forced me to write. And so I've spent the past year and a half just really focusing on writing features, and which was something that I was starting before the pandemic. And now I've written a lot. And I'm like, wow, this is great. So I've really been able to shift gears, and it's focused my attention in that way. And a lot of potential opportunities have arose from that. And my first feature, we have multiple producers attached, and we are developing and in pre-production to shoot in Klamath Falls this November. And we are just sort of navigating the, adventures and perils of financing and working with investors and all that fun stuff. But I hope to continue to write features, and I'm very interested in making low budget films in Southern Oregon, because I love the area and I love the stories that can be told here. So, I'm very fortunate to have been able to continue creating my own opportunity through the pandemic when others couldn't. And just very fortunate to, be able to stay creative throughout the whole process. So thank you.
As I mentioned briefly in my last answer, I managed to film like the week before lockdown happened. So thankfully that didn't affect my production all that much. It didn't affect my post-production all that much either, because I knew that I was going to be editing, but it did make the feedback process with professors and friends and family a little bit more challenging, because I couldn't, go over a specific scene with them in person. I'd have to just send them an, email and Zoom and all that kind of stuff. But it didn't affect it too greatly. And then as for other projects, over the summer and into the fall and winter, I was working on applications for grad school. So that included a lot of writing short film and feature film treatments, and little 5-page scripts and 2-page scripts and little scenes and ideas and all that kind of stuff. So I was had a lot of ideas, and I had to do a lot of writing for that. Thankfully I was accepted, so I will be going in the fall. but yeah, so I actually had a fairly productive quarantine just because of applying to different schools. So I've got a lot of projects that I would like to expand and work on now too. So.
Well, I had, I was out and about kind of traveling for a while for about a year. And then, like I said, I moved in Ashland this summer. So it was still during the pandemic. But during that time, I was still collecting video footage because it just seemed like there was one thing after another that just kept happening and happening and happening. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll just kind of sit on it for a little bit. And as I'm collecting more footage, you know, I keep adding it in. But I was also waiting for the original footage that was on my hard drive that my ex-husband had. So that took a year to get back as well. But in the meantime, much like Martin, I've been writing as well. I'm predominantly a screenwriter. I have a master's in creative writing with a concentration in screenwriting, whatever that means. But yeah, definitely writing. And I have several projects. I haven't quite decided which one I want to do first, but the fact that I'm here and I'm meeting a lot of other local filmmakers, I'm really excited to do that because I don't know anybody here. I don't have any connections here yet. And so I'm just very excited to meet with you guys all and get to know you all more. And hopefully we can collaborate on something in the future. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Jamie. And thank you all of you for sharing with us. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up, but I really appreciate you taking the time and for sharing your work with us and for participating in the film festival. I hope that you enjoy your virtual festival experience, and I hope we'll see you all at the live June events and we can have a distanced meeting in person. So thank you all so much.